Because the entire system is designed to make you fail. The way I explain it is going through an eviction in a rent control unit is a little bit like getting through the American Ninja Warrior gauntlet. It's not hoops. There are hoops of fire that you have to jump through and do the ring where you have to somehow lift yourself up and go like this and
right.
stuff that seems like they're doing it by magic, but they're just really strong. Foreign concept to me. So yeah, that's what you have to do, and you have to get everything right, otherwise you fall in the water.
Hello everyone, Rick Albert here with another episode of The Key to the City of Angels. I'm super excited to have Niv Davidovich here. Thank you, Niv, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick.
Yeah, so you're a partner of the Davidovich Stone Law Group. We've communicated before. So you do a lot with landlord-tenant laws, construction. Kind of give us a little bit of background on how you got into this space, right? Because you could have been a tax attorney, you could have been a criminal defense attorney, but you chose the pain.
I feel like it sort of chose me.
Right.
So I was actually going to be an entertainment attorney because my background is in writing music. So I was a songwriter and a producer, sort of while and before I was a lawyer. And so I wanted to stay in that business. And then I discovered that doing entertainment law, the transactional side, is super duper boring and is not fun. So when I sort of ended that part of my career and transitioned full-time to law, I started working for a sole practitioner. A lot of his clients were either in real estate or hotels or had construction issues. So that's when I started to get exposure to the legal side of it. And a lot of people in my family were in the construction side, on the engineering side, my dad, my uncle. So I sort of grew up hearing about all of those issues and all the fun disputes and challenges that arise from that process. And then my first job after that, it's my first real firm job. I was defending real estate agents, so and architects and engineers and other people who have professional liability issues. And so that all kind of blended into this construction and real estate experience. The next job I had after that sort of continued on with that and a lot more construction law experience. And that's when I first, maybe not first, but had to do a couple more UDs. And then when I went out on my own, all the people that I was going after as clients, because they were the people in my community who I actually knew, they were in the real estate field, or they are in the real estate field. So I decided to be a real estate lawyer because that's what was around.
Very cool. So let's kind of dive right into it. What has changed over the last, let's say 6 to 12 months as far as the real estate law landscape here in Los Angeles? Because so much has happened.
6 to 12 months. Okay. Let's see.
Summary.
Okay. A few of the important things that have happened.
Let's go that.
Number one, unincorporated LA County increased their threshold from 1 month to 2 months. So before, the stupid rule was that in order to serve someone a 3-day notice to pay or quit, they have to owe not what most people incorrectly conceive as 1 month of their own rent, but rather it's 1 month of the fair market rent. What is the fair market rent? It's the number that the federal HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department, use to calculate fair market rents for how much they should be paying through their Section 8 program. In other words, a measure that has absolutely nothing to do with evictions. It would be like saying the threshold is going to be how many chickens laid eggs today divided by 57. Because that's how we're going to pick it.
Which all that does is increase rent, right? Because if I want to be at that economic threshold, so I'm not months behind.
It's not just that. The problem is that you can't raise the rent on the people who have the very low rents. So anyway, the rule used to be 1 month. That's what it still is in the city of Los Angeles. The county tried to change it to 3 months. That was a little too crazy for them. So then they were like, okay, we'll go with 2 months, as if that's not also completely bat Crazy.
You can swear on my show. It's totally fine.
Excellent. This is batshit crazy.
Right?
There's no other way to describe it, because I'm actually going to pull up the FMRs as we're sitting here today. So, FMRs for LA for 2026. 2-bedroom, okay, fairly common, and the one that's in the middle is 2903. That means in order for you to serve a 3-day notice on someone who is not paying the rent on their 2-bedroom apartment in the county of, in the unincorporated parts, they have to owe you $5,806.
It's a lot of money. But even like the $2,900 for a 2-bedroom is intuitively, it actually feels high. Yes, in like areas like Westwood, that's nothing. But like there's a lot of rentals in like the San Fernando Valley that aren't renting that.
So these numbers are actually an amalgam of all of the numbers that they use for the entire county. So what they're doing is they're averaging out Bel Air and Pacoima and saying, all right, what's the overall average for 2 bedrooms for anywhere that there are rentals? And this number is used to calculate how much they can pay for Section 8 rent, which, by the way, is sometimes a little bit juiced. Why? Because the housing authorities actually want to encourage landlords to take the Section 8 tenants. So landlords know that Section 8 tenants tend to be a lot more trouble than regular old tenants. And so they're expecting a little bit of hazard pay.
Sure.
And so these numbers have to be also up a little bit.
I see. So like they're almost like they're factoring in that additional risk.
Factoring additional risk, yes. So these numbers are also used to calculate how much you can pay for affordable, how much you can charge to affordable units. They also want to keep that number higher. Why? Because they want to encourage people to build affordable units. And the higher these numbers are, the more an affordable building will pencil out. To the extent where the reason some of the developers are building affordable buildings is because the affordable limits are higher than the rents they're getting from their legacy rent control tenants.
That makes sense. I was wondering that because like I hear on podcasts like, oh yeah, we're building affordable housing. I'm like, how?
Because the limits are high.
Yeah, that is really high.
Yeah.
Okay.
And remember that when you take a unit and make it quote affordable, what you're doing is, and people get this confused a lot. This is a very important point. There's rent control and there's affordable. And those two things are not the same. What affordable does is it says, here's a number, a flat number, like $2,903. This is the most that you can charge for this unit this year. Last year might have been $2,300. Now it's $2,900. That might be an increase of 30%. No one cares. We're not worried about the increase. We're worried about what's the max number. Rent control says, at least in California, because of Costa-Hawkins, when you initially rent it, you can set it at whatever number you want, whatever the market will bear. But from that point forward, for this particular tenancy, you can only raise it by X%. Whatever that percent happens to be for your particular building in your particular jurisdiction. Those are two very different things. And so a lot of the times, if you have someone who's been in a rent control unit for 20 years, you can actually take that unit, make it affordable, and charge an affordable person more than the rent control person was paying. And you can also increase their rent by a higher percentage if the number goes higher according to HUD.
Which then takes inventory away from those that aren't in that program.
Well, I mean, it's supposed to be used by working people who aren't making that much money. So in theory, it's not a bad idea so long as you set these affordable rents at levels which support the construction and maintenance of the building, which they are starting to do that. Of course, the problem is the rest of the nonsense that gets involved with building. And remember, the HUD is trying to present numbers and worry about a national landscape. And they really don't have anything to do with fixing all of the craziness that goes on in the building departments. That's a very localized issue.
Yeah. I guess like if I own a rental that I'm not going to go anything lower than that guideline, right? Because if a tenant's like, hey, I'm not part of that program, but I can't afford 2,900, it's like, well, why would I go less? I might, if that's the case, I might as well just go with Section 8 or whatever. So now the tenants are screwed.
Well, again, the affordable units can only get rented to affordable people. In other words,
Right.
people who only make a certain amount of income. But those income numbers are set pretty high. You can actually have a 6-figure family income when you have, I think it's 5 people. And you're going for an affordable unit that's like at 80% of AMI or average median income. So there are different kinds of affordable as well. There's 80% AMI, 50% AMI, 30%, also known as low income, very low income, and extremely low income. And so how much money your household is allowed to make depends on how many people are in your household and then what kind of unit you're trying to do. So you have to match your income with your household to an affordable unit that can absorb how much income you make.
Got it. So then let's switch gears a little bit because we talked earlier about like there's some added risk, with those types of tenants, but even in general, there's high risk in Los Angeles. It just is what it is. Like that's just how the system's been set up.
Here's my rule. It's very simple. 95% of all the tenants, whether it's, I think in LA and then outside the number goes higher, but 95% of all tenants are lovely people, regular, just nice people that you're friends with. And they pay the rent on time. They don't break anything. They don't bother anybody. They don't harass the neighbors. They don't cook meth. They don't run prostitution rings from their units. They don't try and chop up their neighbors with a machete. These are all real stories, by the way. And the other 5% are all the people I get to hear about.
They're the ones who keep your lights on.
Very much so. And they, like the rules, are batshit crazy.
Right.
So, yeah, but there's a lot of them because 5% of all the renters in LA is a very, very large population of crazy people.
Right. So it's not a matter of if, but when for a lot of these people.
I mean, some people really are like, they have psychological problems, and this is known to whatever agency it is that brought them into the apartment. And I've seen the videos, crazy stuff.
Right. So then why because like someone stops paying rent and so you start the eviction, but they still somehow lose. So how are these like they don't get through the eviction. So how are they losing when they have such a strong case to begin with?
Because the entire system is designed to make you fail. The way I explain it is going through an eviction in a rent control unit is a little bit like getting through the American Ninja Warrior gauntlet. It's not hoops. There are hoops of fire that you have to jump through and do the ring where you have to somehow lift yourself up and go like this, and stuff that seems like they're doing it by magic, but they're just really strong. Foreign concept to me. So yeah, that's what you have to do, and you have to get everything right, otherwise you fall in the water. All the tenant has to do is put one banana peel in front of you, and that's it. They're done. So there's so many hoops to jump through. For example, you have to register your property. You have to pay the fees to the city. You have to post all the things in your building correctly. You have to update the postings because some of them change annually. Some of them change more than annually. You have to know which things to serve on the tenant. You have to know if you're doing the notice, always a bad idea if this is not something you do on the regular, how to draft the notice, what to put in the notice, to have the rules changed for the notice. And you have to know all of these things. How do you serve it? How do you calculate the rent? What do I put on? How much rent am I allowed to put in there? Am I allowed to do late fees? Hint, no, you're not. But a lot of people just don't know this stuff. This is a business that used to be designed so that people could do it as a side hustle. It was the original OG side hustle is having rentals. And it still is for a lot of people who don't have rentals in highly regulated areas like Los Angeles.
Sure.
But now it's impossible because it would be like saying, oh, I'm just going to have this nuclear power facility as my side hustle. No, there's going to be a lot of regulations you're going to have to jump through to run your side hustle nuclear power facility.
Yeah, I always joked that the only thing passive about real estate is on your tax return.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. Yeah, it's not passive. So, but even I think that's true even outside of highly regulated areas. So my experience with commercial places and my experience with residential out of state is it's still not passive, but it's a lot easier than it is here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still talk to my property managers maybe once a month.
Yeah, I talk
For
to
my
them
out-of-state-
more often than that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Right now, we're seeing higher vacancies, so we're having more conversations, even down to like we're reviewing applications together,
Right.
right? Which we didn't have to do before. But it's like, okay, there's this little nuance, there's these issues, so then we navigate through it, which to be fair, when it's out of state, it's one of those where if we have to do an eviction, it's easier. So the risk, so like I can take a little bit more of a risk,
Right, exactly.
which is harder to do here. But how do people even keep up with this stuff? Like, even on the brokerage side, any documentation we receive is always at a state level. It's never localized. How do people keep up with all this information?
I think AI helps to a degree, but you have to understand what it's spitting back out at you. So it's if you ask it for legal information, it's going to spit back out at you legal information, and you have to understand the language that it's speaking, just like it does for literally any other industry that you ask it about. It'll answer in as plain as English as possible, but a lot of it is going to be technical jargon. And so when I ask Claude or ChatGPT to help me, it's a lot different than when a non-lawyer asks.
Okay. It's all about the prompts. So it's like, it's garbage in, garbage out. So like, because I'm going to be a panelist on leases next month. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about is like, you can't just go to ChatGPT and say, put together a California lease. Because what if it misses all the disclosures? Because ChatGPT is like, well, that's a disclosure. It's not a lease.
So you have to know how to use the document. So that's how to use the tool and understand if it's giving you good stuff or bad stuff. So that's very important.
Do you foresee that being an issue going forward?
But yeah, it's very difficult to keep up with the stuff because it just changes all the time. On top of which, remember that it's changing in different areas. So, for example, in the county of Los Angeles, besides the unincorporated county, there's 88 cities, and I think at last count, approximately 20 of them had some sort of a local restriction, either on rents or evictions or both. And not only are all of those cities changing it every so often, but new cities are adopting as we go. So one time someone asked me, and every time I deal with a city that I don't deal with on the regular basis, I have to go check. And literally one time someone said, hey, can I do this in Huntington Park? I don't know. I have to go check now. And I checked, and that week Huntington Park had passed an RSO ordinance. So then I go read it. And every time someone asks me about a new city, I have to go check. And even if it's a city I've done before, if I haven't touched it in 2-3 months, I gotta go check.
So is this like a monthly thing people should be checking in on?
It depends on how many units you have in how many different jurisdictions. So if you have one building in one city, yeah, sure, check monthly. It's going to take you 5 minutes. If you have, hundreds of units scattered across the state or multiple states, good luck.
Right.
I mean, theoretically, that's what you have property manager.
Yeah, but even then, property managers aren't always on top of it. Like what I started doing was on LinkedIn, I would join some of the local like landlord boards for those markets. And almost like in the hopes that they're going to post something useful.
Right. And I think that helps. For example, a lot of the new information, especially as it's coming down before it's official comes through AGLA, and AGLA is really, really good on providing information, not just fighting those things, but letting you know about those fights that they're having, and during that process, letting you know about the ordinances that are coming down the pipe. So I think that's actually a helpful idea.
Yeah. So do you think going forward, because there's so many different sources, that AI will play a bigger role? Because like, it's hard to call up an attorney every month and pay the however much you guys charge just to get an answer.
Yeah, but it's a lot cheaper than making mistakes.
Fair.
So that's number one. And number two, again, it's like you said, garbage in, garbage out. While AI has been really, really helpful to me in my own personal business, because I'm using it in a way that is A, based on my knowledge, B, using my existing forms already, my pre-AI forms as bases, and and C, because I know how to use the tool. For everyone else, for example, it is causing a mass overconfidence in their ability to suddenly become attorneys. And we have just this explosion of pro pers. In other words, people representing themselves who think, oh, I have Claude, so now I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I know as much as that guy does.
Right.
Because the entire legal knowledge of the universe is before me. I am Thanos of knowledge. So, which is not true. And so they file these complaints that are dumb, that we have to sit there and fight, and the courts bend over backwards to let them do all sorts of nonsense. If we did 5% of the nonsense they pulled, we would be sanctioned, and the judge would report us to the bar. And even though the law says if you're going to represent yourself, you have to abide by the exact same rules that a lawyer would, no judge actually enforces that.
And it works both sides. Even like a tenant might start using Claude or ChatGPT.
All of them do. And you can tell when they're doing it.
There's going to be a point where AI is just going to keep fighting each other, right? Like the tenant's using AI to say something. The landlord's going to use AI to respond to it. And next thing you know, it's like people aren't even talking.
I mean, they're talking. They're sort of reading what the AIs are saying to each other. But yeah.
It's going to be a problem.
I think it's actually... I don't know that it's such a problem.
Why is that?
Because if everyone... Right now it's a problem because the AIs are very much, I guess, attuned to only seeing the point of view of the user. Versus in the future, if everything was just decided by robots without the need for emotion, I feel like we'd get a lot more done quickly and correctly.
Fair. I actually thought about this, where basically AI can go through all the details and immediately like, yeah, an eviction is actually warranted. Like those decisions could be made before it even gets to an attorney, before it even gets to the courts. So then the tenant and landlord are like, okay, we know where we stand.
Right. But that would require a great deal of emotional intelligence and maturity on behalf of the tenant.
That's why.
It would require a great deal of emotional maturity and realism on behalf of the landlord. So the tenant has to get over their feelings of shame and fear and the natural desire to then project that onto the landlord. Because generally speaking, it's very, very rare that we see a tenant who says, I have the rent, I'm stocking it away, I'm not paying you because you're not taking care of these habitability issues. Very rare. Almost every case we do that's non-payment of rent, something happened to that tenant where they can't pay the rent anymore. And sometimes it's not even their fault, but it's also not the landlord's fault. And the bank and the insurance company and the maintenance people and the employees don't care about what happened to that tenant because it's not any of their faults either. So the tenant is understandably stuck in this situation where they feel ashamed that they can't pay for their basic expenses. They feel scared that they're going to get put out on the street. And instead of coming and saying, okay, this is my responsibility, it may not be my fault, but it is my problem, and coming to the landlord and saying, I have this issue, here's what happened. Can we work this out? Can I get on a payment plan? And if I don't meet it, I'll be out in such a number of days. If they just came to the landlord and said that, I wouldn't have a job.
Right.
No one would call me. They would just make those deals. But they don't. They tend to take those feelings and project them onto the landlord and say, no, somehow or another, the reason I can't pay the rent is the landlord's fault. And all of a sudden, all these habitability issues that never were raised, that didn't exist before, they're like, oh, did you know that the AC is broken? Did you know that the heat is broken? You know, I can't use my heat. We're like, dude, it's August. You haven't turned your heat on in 5 months. It's like, yeah, but it's not working. You know, the faucet did 3 drops of water. It's not working.
And now there's mold.
And now there's mold. So it's, yeah, exactly. So those all come out of emotions. Then I talk to a landlord, and the landlord's mad that this tenant is stealing from him, which he is, because he gave him a service, he gave him a product, which is a place to live. This person is not paying him. At Ralph's, at the supermarket, that's called stealing.
Right.
At Macy's, you take clothing, you don't pay for them, it's called shoplifting.
But was it keep it thrifty, stay under $9.50?
Even then, it's still a misdemeanor. It's still shoplifting, even if you only take $50. Forget the $9.50. But for some reason, when it's an apartment, it's considered freedom fighting to not pay your rent.
It's their right.
Whatever it is, the landlord doesn't feel like that. The landlord feels like he's getting stolen from, but he needs to just get good with the reality that it may cost more to evict the person than it's worth to fight with them. And they're probably just not going to see that money ever, because the people who fall on hard times, they don't really get out of it in any sort of framework of time that makes it worth it to follow them around.
Sure. I mean, I would imagine they get into some sort of fight or flight mode.
Yeah, but most of them, but the fight is being done for them for free. I used to say for free. It's really not for free. We're paying for it.
Right. Free to them, but someone's paying that.
Free to them. No, the someone is you and me.
Yeah. Right. Which is the conversation I've had with people, even recently. Yeah, because what I've been doing is I've been tracking what's going on in New York, right? Because what's happening, I think I see your pupils. I don't know how far they got rolled back. Because what's happening in New York might eventually happen here, right? So I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. And one of the things that was proposed was no credit checks, no income checks. And so I'm having conversations with people about it. I'm like, you have to understand, there's so much layered risk. We have to do something to alleviate that.
You cannot do no credit checks and all that stuff, because you're going to invite people who are scammers. You're going to invite people who are criminals. You're going to invite people who are psychologically imbalanced, and you're going to end up having to evict them anyway. So it's not about less screening now. It's actually more screening.
Yeah, I agree. It was interesting because I've talked to well, if someone had a criminal background, but they're fine now, should you accept them or not? And I talk to people say, the challenge I have is my properties are all multifamily, which means each one of my properties is a little community. And I have to factor that in, that I'm letting someone into that community.
Exactly. Look, if someone's criminal background is a misdemeanor for extreme jaywalking when they were 15 years old or something,
right?
All right, fine. But if you're telling me someone's I diddled these kids when I was 20, but I'm 55 now, I'm over all the diddling. No. Once a diddler, always a diddler. That's it. I'm not letting you into my community, and so all of a sudden you're like, oops, I had a relapse with the kid next door.
Are you the landlord responsible? Because if I'm another tenant, well, you knew that going into it.
Yeah, they could absolutely sue you for that. And the way I explain it is this. There's some regulation in California about when you're allowed to take into account someone's criminal background. I say whatever to that, because
right.
I'll say it this way. once you are, when you have them outside the building and they want to sue you because you allegedly discriminated against them or violated some regulation in not letting that person in, that's one lawsuit. And that's a much harder lawsuit for them to win. Once they're in your unit, it's hard to evict them. And then also, if they do something bad to the other tenants and you knew this was a risky risk, then that other tenant who's now the victim of the new tenant can sue you and say, you knew, you let him in anyway, you didn't tell anybody, and now I've been victimized. That's a very difficult lawsuit to defend. I'd rather have the crazy person's lawsuit from outside the unit than the victim's lawsuit from inside the unit.
I see. So it's like if you're going to get sued, like you may get sued either way. So it's like let's reduce the risk.
Exactly. The risk of the outside guy saying my criminal conviction was 30 years ago and you didn't have the right to say no to me because I'm all reformed now. Like, I don't know that you're reformed. You know, let him go find a lawyer to file that case. But the person who gets victimized, the next door neighbor in the building who gets victimized by the tenant whose background search you were aware of and let him in anyway, they're not going to have any problems finding a lawyer to take that case.
Right. But you can't really disclose to the other tenants because now you're getting to like privacy issues. That's like saying, someone like
you're really under no obligation, to be honest, to maintain privacy. Once someone gives you information, it's a good practice. I'm not saying go put everyone's credit reports on the bulletin board. But there's no landlord-tenant privilege.
Okay. Fair enough. So then going forward, when it comes to some of this vetting, because like especially in California where it's like first come, first serve. So now we actually have to be more strict. Like I actually never cared about the credit score number. I always cared about the history. But now if I have to do first come, first serve, I actually have to have a number.
Right.
So what are you seeing in terms of what landlords are doing in terms of like, hey, this is our requirements. This is the background checks. Are they doing what more are they doing now that they didn't do before?
It depends on which landlords. And it depends on how comfortable they are with taking some risks. There are ways of getting around some of these issues that are not what we might call legal, but they still might be a good idea. Okay. So, for example, let's say you don't want to take somebody. And the reason you don't want to take somebody is based on information you can find out from outside of their credit report. When you're rejecting someone, at least in part, based on something you found in their credit report, you do have to tell them that they aren't being declined for that reason. You have to give them a copy of the report and tell them where they can find a copy, etc. Sure. When it's not that reason, there's really no obligation to tell them why you're declining them. More importantly, what's the timeline on when you're supposed to tell them yes or no? There isn't one. So just don't tell them either.
So you're saying, well, from the time someone applies, there isn't like a clock of when they need to get a response by?
Nope. So that means you can just never give them a response. And that's what I advise a lot of people to do.
So you're ghosting them, basically.
Yep. How many times has the government ghosted people? You go and apply for something, we're working on it. Fine. We'll just do what they do. We're also working on it.
It's in process. But then in the meantime, you end up accepting somebody else, and then you just say, they met all the criteria.
No, it's a mistake. Someone in the office didn't know I was still working on yours. So then this person came in, but they live there now. Oops.
And there was no damage because they were never committed to the place anyways.
Right. And a lot of the times, if you just keep ghosting them, they'll move on. Most of the time, they just move on. They need somewhere else to live.
Right. They still need a place. So they're still going to apply to other places at the same time rather than just hoping that they're going to get this one place.
Yep. So now this is guerrilla warfare. Is this legal? Close enough.
Right. Until someone takes this to court or whatever. But it's like in the meantime,
prospective denial and you really did find this information from the credit report, etc., etc. But again, what are the damages? Right? It's not like we wrote you an email and they get sued because someone asked them, do you take Section 8? And they didn't know that you're not allowed to say no, and so they say, no, we don't take Section 8. All right, that case is over. You're going to lose that case, and so you should just settle it very quickly, which is what I do with all my Section 8 scam lawsuits.
But what's the damage?
Who cares? The settlements tend to be, on average, about $15,000, $16,000. And the reason they set it at that number is because it's far lower than the cost of defense. And so the best thing I can do for landlords who find themselves in that very expensive learning experience is to settle it very, very quickly.
And the money goes to the person, not to the government.
Well, yeah, it's nothing to do with the government. The scam goes like this. Lawyer partners up with someone who's on Section 8, right? This person lives in their Section 8 apartment, has absolutely no intention of moving or even visiting another Section 8 apartment. That person starts emailing and texting all the brokers and agents and all the landlords they can find, looking for people who are not managed by professional managers. They're looking for real estate agents, hopefully new people, maybe some people who are doing leasing because they're not really selling a lot right now and they know nothing about the rules. Or better yet, just landlords who are trying to lease out a single family home or a single condo and they really don't know anything about the rules. So they'll text them, never call, they'll text them and they'll say, hi, I'm interested in your apartment. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead and apply. Do you take Section 8? Answer, no. Case is over. Because there's no difference legally between do you take Section 8 and no, and do you take black people and no. Do you take Jewish people? No. Do you take families? No. All of that is the exact same thing. All of it. Right? So legally, I'm saying legally, it's all considered discrimination that is against the law. Does this mean you have to take every single Section 8 person who applies? Of course not. It's very simple. Do you take Section 8? Yes, of course we do. Feel free to apply. That's it. That's all you have to do.
And you can still have the same criteria.
The criteria is a little different and the process is a little different. So for Section 8 folks, you have to give them the option of, instead of checking their credit, to provide you with proof of verifiable means of legal income. That means they need to show you that they make legal money somehow, and you need to measure that income against their portion of how much they're paying. So in other words, let's say someone comes to you with a $2,000 voucher, right? And the apartment is $2,500. And Hackler says, all right, we'll pay $2,000 and he'll pay $500. You can't ask him to show legal income of $7,500 if it's 3x. You can only ask him to show income of $1,500 because it's 3x of his part of the rent.
Which is reasonable.
Sure. Except for that's $1,500 a month.
Right. But if you factor in the government income, then they would technically qualify. Because that was the whole premise of the law, right? It's you're discriminating based on source of income.
Sure. Except for that, generally speaking, if the person's only making $18,000 a year, there's a reason for that.
Right. Yeah, it could lead to other habits, other issues. What if they lose their voucher or whatever?
Yeah, and that's why I'm very sorry to tell people, but Section 8 tenants are very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
I see it all the time.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I have Section 8 tenants that I inherited, but they were all out of state. So it hasn't been as big of an issue. I did notice when I toured one of my properties that it was the one that was least kept.
Right. Now, this is not always true. For example, my grandparents had Section 8, Russian immigrants who didn't work. And I don't know how Russian people do it. I'm Russian, obviously. But everyone else who wants to get Section 8 is in line for 10 years. Russian people get off the plane at LAX, and by the time the Uber ride is over at West Hollywood, they're on Section 8.
Interesting.
I don't know what they're doing, but it's some sort of magic. They all have Section 8. I don't get it. But anyway, they had it, and I remember my grandparents were like, they would clean the place up. They were afraid of the inspection. When the inspector came, they would give them like liquor and food, and they wanted to get passed. And now that's not all Section 8 people. A lot of the times people are on Section 8 for a reason, and those reasons impact their ability to be regular members of the apartment community or society as a whole. Sure. And that's unfortunately where I get involved. And I have to show the jury videos of, here's Exhibit A of this person being psycho. Here's Exhibit B of this person being psycho. Here's all the emails we have from their neighbors saying that they're scared for their lives.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. So then how do we navigate our day-to-day risk management for all these different things as we own rental properties in the LA area, that sort of deal?
How do you do what?
Like, how do we manage the day-to-day, like risk management in general, right? Because everything we're talking about is like you're always like on thin ice.
Yeah, you have to choose your battles. A lot of the time, if you suffer from this manager PTSD of saying, I can't tell the tenant no, I can't tell this applicant no, I can't say or do anything because I feel like I have no rights, because that is exactly how the government is trying to make you feel, then you're going to make bad decisions. You have to understand that while the situation is very bad and it's really not good, it's not as bad as your feelings make you think that as your feelings make you think it is. It's actually better than that, which is the good news. There are still things you can do, and there are still ways you can avoid running into these problems. Now, sometimes they're not really avoidable. If your building is in a place where the only types of tenants you will attract tend to be troublemaker tenants, sorry, that's just where your building is.
I had that exact conversation with someone recently where they're like, well, I've never had problems with tenants. I'm like, your rentals are in an area where they don't typically have those types of problems.
Yeah.
It's just the demographics.
Right, exactly. And if you have very high rent areas, you might run into a couple of spoiled rich kids. Sure. One or two every now and then. If you're by the water, I don't know why, but you run into complete maniacs of a different variety. It's not low income maniacs, it's just other kinds of maniacs. But other than that, in higher income places with people who have more to lose, they tend to be less crazy.
See, you could create a heat map for all this. You'll get in so much trouble for it, but you can create a heat map of like, hey, these areas we see more. I mean, LA City Controller already does their map of like cash for keys, even though my understanding is like that number is way off because it doesn't include settlements.
Second, for example, the city controller, Comrade Mejia, or Mejiavich, I should probably start calling him because he wants to be a communist so bad. He published this list of 100 worst landlords.
I remember that.
Taking a page from Comrade Mamdani. But like all communists, it's completely full of lies. In fact, I happen to know one of the buildings that were in the top 10, and that building, while it had problems a very, very long time ago, has now been commended by the very inspectors who work in his branch of government, and come and said, this is not just a building that meets code, it exceeds code. This is a very nice place to live. And he still put it right up there. He doesn't care. Communists don't care. They will lie, cheat, steal, kill, murder, steal again from the people they murdered to achieve their evil means.
And it's like, it was almost like, what does the list even accomplish? Because I remember when that list came out, I was like, okay, what do I do with this information?
It foments anger against landlords.
Right.
And so it tries to stoke the revolution that they are trying to start.
And then it's like, I've had one of the common questions I get is, hey, can we start a list of bad tenants?
I've heard that too.
I don't.
Everyone's afraid to do it, but I don't understand. If the government can start a list of bad landlords, why can't we start a list of bad tenants?
It's a good question. When I consulted an attorney years ago about it, he's like, well, you can, right? But there is some level of like, well, how do you know it's the same Rick Albert versus another one? So then you have to provide some sort of private information, social security number, driver's license, something. And now you start getting to like those types of issues versus a building's a building, right? Here's the address. You can't mistake that for anything.
Well, then the list will be limited to people with names like Niv Davidovich.
There you go. On Zillow, there is another agent named Rick Albert. And at one point, he did have more reviews than I did. So I did do a campaign with my past clients saying, I want to be the #1 Rick Albert on Zillow. And my clients got such a kick out of it. The ones who didn't get a chance to write reviews started writing reviews for me. And now I'm the #1 Rick Albert on Zillow. There you go. The little things. So, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I got to find it. There is actually an Instagram account in New York someone started where they were posting all the bad tenants. It was like their photo, their information. And then people are like, this is horrible. Why are you doing this? And she was like, it's the same reason why you're posting bad landlords. Like, it goes both ways.
That's why on Uber, both the riders and the drivers get marked.
That could be interesting.
It's both the hosts and the guests that get graded.
Yeah.
On eBay, the sellers and the buyers. Huh?
Yeah.
It seems to be that it's the both sides of the coin in every other transaction we do.
Yeah, that's fair. Those could be like interesting things to like factor in. So it's like, if you have to go to court, it's like, look, this person has a history of this. They had reviews. Here's this, there's this. And that can go both ways. I think that's the challenge I've seen with people. It's like, you can hold landlords accountable. Not all landlords are great. There are slumlords, but there are also slum tenants. Like, it goes both ways.
That does not fit in with the mantra of the evil army that is developing this movement.
Right.
Their mantra is very simple. If you are a landlord, you are doing something wrong. You are doing something evil because you are charging money to live somewhere. And you're not allowed to do that, private citizen. We're going to take over your unit. Now, when we do it, it's fine. When we charge money, it's totally okay. Because we have to. We're the government. And I always want to ask those tenants, I'm like, when your plan works out and all of the units are the projects, do you think that all the units are now just going to become Beverly Hills? Like the nice parts of Beverly Hills?
Right.
Now that Nitya Raman is the mayor, oh my God, she's going to eminent domain all of the apartment buildings, and now we're all going to live in beautiful 2,000 square foot apartments, and there won't be any habitability issues. What part of your experience with the projects leads you to believe that this is going to be the conclusion of this experiment? And by the way, when your landlord is the housing department, who are you going to call when they don't fix things? I don't think they've even thought about it like one step past this.
Oh, no. I was like, well, what happens when you get a politician in who's like, oh, we have to cut a budget? Which districts or which areas didn't vote for me? It's not like people can get punished, right? Like, it can be totally wild.
It's really a crazy system right now. I'm really, really praying that normal, standard, down the middle Americans stop this craziness before it goes past the point of no return.
Right. And when that happens, we'll have you back on the show. We'll talk about it. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe it won't.
Well, no, if that happens, there won't be a show because they're just going to rip up the Constitution and they're not going to let anyone publish anything. So
They'll have their own podcast.
they'll have the only podcasts.
Right. Fair enough. Well, Niv, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people get a hold of you?
Our website is davidovichlaw.com. That's DAVIDOVICHLAW.com. You can reach us by phone at 818-661-2420. And you can always reach me by email, niv@davidovichlaw.com. That's N as in Nancy, I as in Isaac, V as in Victor, @davidovichlaw.com. Happy to help any struggling landlords out there. If you're a tenant, apologize profusely, but we don't represent you.
And I have to say, your stuff on LinkedIn is phenomenal. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you watching and appreciating.
Of course. All right. Thank you again for coming on the show, and everyone watching or listening, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Want to keep unlocking the secrets to building real wealth in Los Angeles? Stick around for the next episode. Tap the video on screen to keep watching.